Welcome back to the world asleep. Tonight, the sands of time lie still and the wind moves quietly across a narrow pass between mountain and sea, a place where silence once met fire and where courage took its final breath. They called it Thermopylae, the Hot Gates, a throat of land where 300 Spartan warriors, led by their king Leonidas, stood against an empire that blotted out the horizon. For 3 days they fought not to win, but to be remembered, to hold a line so narrow that the world itself seemed to pause and watch. But the story you know, the clash, the blood, the legend, is only part of it. Beneath the armour and the iron was something quieter, something sacred, a way of living that turned discipline into worship and silence into strength. As the sea whispers against the stones tonight, we return to that pass, not to see how they died, but to feel how they lived. What made them choose stillness over fear and devotion over survival? What heartbeat moved through their discipline, their unity, their silence? So take a slow breath and let your mind settle. The world outside can wait. The fires have burned out, the shields have fallen, and the air is cool again over the sleeping pass. If you find yourself carried by the calm, by the rhythm of the story, take a moment to stay with it. You can always gently subscribe and leave a like to find yourselves back to this place. Let this stillness linger. It helps us continue these journeys into forgotten places, where history still breathes beneath the dust. Now, close your eyes to the world beyond the screen. Imagine the faint clang of bronze, the distant roll of thunder beyond the mountains, the scent of sea and smoke. The night is deep, the world is silent, and the path ahead leads through the mist, toward a time when men became more than mortal, when courage was carved into silence. This is the story of the 300, of the city that worshipped discipline, and of the moment when stillness met eternity. Chapter 1: The City of Silence. The story of the 300 begins far from the roar of battle. It begins in a valley hidden between mountains, where the air is dry and clean, and the river Eurotas runs like a silver thread through the dust. This was Sparta, a city without walls, because its people believed that flesh and will were stronger than stone. In the pale dawn, the city stirs not with chatter, but with discipline. You hear the sound of sandals brushing against the earth, the faint rhythm of training spears slicing through air. There are no cries, no songs, no idle laughter, only the measured breath of a people who built their world upon restraint. Sparta woke each day to silence, and in that silence it forged its strength. The agoge, the ancient training of every Spartan child, was not cruelty for its own sake. It was a ritual, a transformation. At the age of 7, a boy left his mother's arms and entered the brotherhood of endurance. He learned to run on cold mornings, to eat little, to sleep on reeds cut from the riverbank. He learned that pain was not an enemy to flee, but a teacher to endure. The Spartan soul was shaped not in victory, but in patience. When night fell, the boys lay under a sky scattered with stars and whispered not of games, but of discipline. The elders spoke softly of Lycurgus, the lawgiver who gave Sparta its shape, a man half legend, half memory. They said he walked with the gods and returned with laws carved not in stone but in silence. No golden palaces, no painted temples, only a code, to live simply, to speak little, and to serve the city before the self. From this stillness, a strange kind of harmony grew. Every heartbeat belonged to the whole. The farmer in his field, the soldier on his march, the mother weaving cloth by the fire, all moved in rhythm with the same quiet purpose. It was said that a Spartan learned to listen not to words, but to pauses between them, to sense meaning in stillness. Their strength lay not in the sword, but in the calm that steadied the hand holding it. At dawn, the mist drifted through the valley like breath, and the city shone faintly in the light of the rising sun. To the outsider, Sparta seemed austere. Bare stone houses, unadorned temples, no theatre, no market filled with chatter. But within that austerity lived a pulse, an invisible harmony, a discipline that hummed beneath every step. They called it eunomia, the good order, a balance between chaos and control. It was a way of living that asked for everything and gave back a strange, quiet peace. Even their speech was measured. A Spartan did not waste words. Theirs was the language of the few but the essential. One sentence could carry the weight of a book. They believed that to speak too much was to reveal the weakness of uncertainty. Silence, on the other hand, was a kind of armour, polished not to gleam, but to endure. It is said that when travellers visited Sparta, they left bewildered by the stillness, as though they had walked through a living temple where conversation was replaced by purpose. To be Spartan was to belong entirely to your kin, your comrades, your land. The individual was a spark, the city, the flame, and through this unity they achieved a serenity unknown elsewhere in Greece. Other cities sang of philosophy, of art, of passion. Sparta sang of discipline, of harmony between body and will. Where others built statues, Sparta built silence. Yet beneath that calm ran something deeper, a quiet faith that life was sacred only when lived with purpose. Their gods were not distant. They were present in every motion, every breath, every act of devotion. The goddess Artemis watched over the wilds. Apollo watched over order and light. And above them all, the spirit of Ares, the discipline of battle, not the chaos of war, beat steadily within every heart. If you stood among them at sunrise, you would feel it, that collective breath as the city awoke. The sound of shields lifted, of sandals pressing the earth in perfect unison. Even the wind seemed to move differently there, slower, more deliberate, as if afraid to disturb the rhythm. Sparta was more than a city. It was a meditation in motion. The women, too, carried this strength. They spoke with clarity, with purpose, and raised their sons to return with their shields or upon them. But behind the sternness was affection, a fierce, proud love for the land and its people. They knew that freedom demanded sacrifice, and that the truest love sometimes appeared as steel. Every festival, every ritual, every silence reinforced the same truth. To live was to serve something greater. To die for it was not tragedy, but fulfillment. Thus the city slept without fear. No thief dared enter, no poet dared mock. For even in rest the Spartans seemed awake, 1,000 eyes behind closed lids, guarding an idea as old as the mountains that cradled them. As centuries passed, travellers told stories of this strange people. They said that Sparta was carved from the bones of discipline, that even its shadows stood in formation. They said that in the dead of night one could hear the faint rhythm of marching feet, not ghosts but memory itself, pacing through time. And perhaps it was true. For when a people live so completely by their code, their essence does not fade. It lingers, whispering through the ages like the rustle of reeds along the Eurotas. If you close your eyes now, you might feel it, the pulse of that ancient silence. It hums through history, through stone, through breath. It asks for nothing, demands nothing. It simply is. A stillness so complete that even thought slows to match its rhythm. And from that silence came the song of iron. From discipline, the hum of destiny. From the valley of still hearts, the echo of defiance that would one day shake an empire. For beyond those quiet fields, beyond the river's calm, a shadow was stirring, an ocean of men and banners and dust. and the city of silence, unmoved, began to ready itself. They did not shout, they did not boast, they simply prepared, as they always had, in stillness. In that moment, Sparta was not a place, it was an idea, breathing slowly beneath the dawn, and soon the world would learn what silence sounds like when it stands its ground. Chapter 2. The Making of Shadows. Morning breaks over the valley, thin and silver. The mist curls low across the fields, and from within it comes the sound of feet, steady, deliberate, moving in rhythm with the breath of the earth itself. The boys of Sparta are awake. They rise before the sun, not because they are told to, but because it has become their nature. To sleep beyond dawn would be to step outside the pulse of the city, and in Sparta nothing moves against the rhythm. At 7 years old they enter the agoj, a word that means to lead, yet here it means to be led inward, into the quiet furnace where weakness is melted down and remade. The first lesson is silence. When asked a question, a boy must answer briefly or not at all. When scolded, he learns to stand still, his breath deep, his eyes unflinching. Endurance begins not in the limbs, but in the space between thought and speech. In the cold months they train barefoot on the hard earth. The dust clings to their skin, the wind scours their faces clean. They learn to run in silence, to move as one body. Their steps form in a single, continuous sound, soft, unbroken, like the low murmur of the ureters at night. Hunger visits often, but it is an expected guest. A Spartan boy learns to greet it calmly, to measure each bite as if it were a ritual. Discipline is nourishment, restraint is comfort. The elders watch from the shadows of the courtyard. They do not praise, they do not console. Their eyes are the mirror in which the young see themselves. To flinch beneath that gaze is to lose the dialogue of strength. To meet it steadily is to speak a language older than words. It is not cruelty. It is the quiet shaping of courage. Sometimes, during the long drills, a whisper moves through the ranks. Stories of the old warriors, those who stood at Thermopylae long before the boys were born. The stories are never shouted. They are recited like prayers, measured, solemn, almost tender. Each name carries the weight of a star. Each deed is a constellation glimpsed through memory's haze. The boys do not yet know the details of that battle. They only know that the 300 became more than men. They became the rhythm of the land. At dusk, when the light fades into copper and the air cools, the city gathers near the training grounds. Mothers stand silent at the edges, their faces calm, their hands still. They do not call out to their sons. They do not offer comfort. To do so would be to break the sacred silence of transformation. They watch, instead, with the pride of guardians who know that love sometimes hides behind distance. Firelight dances on the boys' faces as they stand in lines, their shadows stretching long and thin across the sand. The instructor moves between them, a staff tapping the ground in rhythm. He does not strike, he guides. Each motion is precise, a turn of the wrist, the angle of a shield, the lift of a chin. The staff's tap is the heartbeat of the exercise, the metronome of discipline. Listen, he says softly, not to my voice, to the sound beneath it. They close their eyes. The courtyard falls silent except for the wind moving through the reeds beyond the wall. The instructor continues, that is the sound of the world before noise. That is the sound you must carry into battle. When chaos surrounds you, find that silence again. It will not abandon you. Years pass in that rhythm. Each season sculpts them further into reflections of one another. Their bodies harden, but so do their minds. When one falters, the rest, slow to match his pace until he regains his breath. In Sparta, weakness is not cast out. It is tempered by unity. To stand alone is to vanish. To move together is to become eternal. The nights are long. They lie under the open sky, the scent of smoke in their hair, their thoughts drifting like embers. Some speak quietly of home, others of the day's lessons, but most say nothing. Silence has become the common language. They have learned that words are fragile things, that truth, once spoken, loses a measure of its power. Better to let understanding rest unspoken, to let it breathe like a slow current beneath still water. The mentors teach them not just how to fight, but how to be still. In the stillness, they say, the enemy reveals himself. Not the man before you, but the fear within you. Face that, and no blade can harm you. It is an education in seeing without eyes, in listening without ears, in sensing the pulse of the earth beneath your feet. Occasionally one of the boys is chosen to hunt alone in the wild. He leaves with nothing but a small blade and his courage. For days he moves through the forest, following the faint trails of deer and the whisper of streams. Hunger and solitude press close, but he learns to move with them rather than against them. When he returns, thinner but bright-eyed, the others do not cheer. They simply nod, acknowledging the quiet transformation. Another shadow has been forged. Even celebration is restrained. Victories are marked with calm feasts, bread, olives, and the steady beat of hands against shields in slow, deliberate rhythm. The sound is not applause, it is gratitude. Gratitude for endurance, for breath, for the continued harmony of the city. In Sparta, joy does not leap, it breathes. Among the elders there is a saying, a Spartan is a whisper carved from iron. The boys repeat it to themselves during the hardest trials. It becomes their mantra, a reminder that true strength is not loud, but enduring. When pain arrives, and it always does, they greet it with the same composure they would greet the dawn. To flinch would be to shatter the rhythm. To breathe through it is to master the self. As they grow older, the line between discipline and devotion blurs. The agog is not merely training, it is initiation into a faith where the body is the temple and stillness the prayer. Their days become cycles of motion and quiet, action and reflection. Each movement of the spear, each lift of the shield, is an offering to the unseen symmetry that governs all things. They are learning not only how to defend a city, but how to embody its silence. Sometimes during the late hours, the instructors speak of the sea. They describe the waves striking the cliffs of Thermopylae, the narrow pass where the mountains meet the water. They tell the boys that one day they may stand there, facing an ocean of men. But the purpose of the lesson is not to prepare them for death. It is to prepare them for stillness, to teach them that the mind can remain calm even when the world trembles. The true warrior is not the one who conquers, but the one who remains whole. When the drills end and the torches dim, the city settles once more into its quiet rhythm. From the rooftops, the stars seem closer, as if leaning down to listen. The boys, now almost men, feel their shadows stretch and merge with the darkness around them. They are no longer children of flesh alone. They have become part of the collective breath of Sparta. The boundaries between the individual and the city dissolve, replaced by something larger, something wordless. And in that stillness, they begin to understand the mystery that lies at the heart of their culture. That silence is not emptiness. It is focus. It is presence. It is the space in which purpose takes form. The Spartans do not fear death because they have already met it. In the countless small surrenders of comfort, of self, of noise, they have learned that to give oneself completely is not to vanish, but to endure. As dawn returns, painting the valley in gold, they rise again. The rhythm continues, spears lift, feet move, breath synchronizes. From afar the sound is faint like a heartbeat within the earth. Another day begins in the city of silence, and within it, shadows sharpen into men. Soon, those men will walk beyond the valley, carrying with them the calm of the river, the discipline of the courtyard, and the weight of generations. The world beyond Sparta will call them warriors, heroes, legends. But here, within the quiet heart of their homeland, they're simply part of a pulse that has never stopped. From silence they were shaped, and into silence they shall one day return. Chapter 3. The Omen of the Pass. The wind shifted first. Long before any messenger arrived, before the scouts returned from the hills, Sparta felt it. A restlessness in the air like the faint hum before a storm. The reeds along the Eurotas whispered of movement, not their own, but of distant armies stirring across the horizon. In the temples the flame burned unevenly. The smoke curled toward the north as though drawn by something unseen. The elders called it an omen, the breath of war returning to Greece, yet even they did not speak its name aloud, for to speak it was to acknowledge its weight. Across the sea, beyond the islands, the great empire of Persia was waking. Its armies moved like tides, uncountable and patient, their banners glimmering like scales upon the ocean. King Xerxes, son of Darius, had sworn to avenge the old wounds of Marathon. He would not come as a raider this time. He would come as a wave meant to drown the world. From the east, news travelled slowly. Whispers passed between fishermen, merchants, and wandering priests. At first, they sounded like myth, a bridge of boats spanning the Hellespont, entire rivers drunk dry by marching soldiers, arrows that would blot out the sun. But in Greece, myth and truth had always shared the same language, and so the omens were not dismissed. They were simply understood. Leonidas, king of Sparta, listened to these whispers in silence. He was not a man of many words. His eyes were calm, reflective, the eyes of someone who had long since measured himself against fate and found no need to speak of it. He gathered his council in the dim light of morning, the room thick with incense. No raised voices, no panic, only quiet discussion, the rhythm of breath against stone. They knew the Persians were coming, not if, but when, and yet Sparta could not move freely. The Carnea festival was near, the sacred days when war was forbidden, when even kings must honour the gods by stillness. To break that silence without omen would be to defy the divine itself. But omens, in their strange mercy, had already arrived. That night thunder rolled over Taygetus, though no rain fell. Shepherds in the hills swore they saw red streaks dancing in the clouds like embers flung across the heavens. In Delphi the oracle spoke in riddles, as she always did, her voice trembling with trance. Either Sparta will fall, she said, or one of her kings must die. The words reached Leonidas at dawn. He stood by the river, watching the slow current catch the morning light. Death did not trouble him. It was an old acquaintance. The choice, too, was no choice at all. He'd been raised for this, not for victory, but for balance. The oracle's warning was not a curse. It was permission. When he turned back toward the city, his steps were steady. The decision was already made. He would go, not to conquer, but to hold, to delay the tide, and with him only those willing to walk the same path into shadow. The call was quiet, but every man heard it. 300 chosen warriors, fathers, brothers, sons, gathered before the temple. They were not the youngest or the strongest, but those already bound by life's threads. Men who had sired heirs, whose names would not vanish with their bodies. Each wore the crimson cloak, its folds dark in the twilight. They carried their shields not with pride, but with calm, as if cradling something sacred. Leonidas walked among them, his armour plain, his hair bound simply behind his head. There were no speeches, no promises of glory. Only a single command whispered softly, "Prepare." At the edge of the city, women and elders watched as they assembled. No one wept, no one reached out. A Spartan farewell was silence, the purest expression of faith. One mother touched her son's shoulder and said, "Return with your shield, or on it." Another smiled faintly and whispered, "Go, that we may sleep unbroken." The march began at dusk. Spears glinted in the dying light, the sound of sandals on stone merging with the slow rhythmic beat of drums. The line stretched through the valley and up into the mountain passes. No songs were sung. The only music was the whisper of wind through armour and the low hum of determination beneath it. As night descended, they camped beneath cypress trees. The stars shone bright and cold, reflecting off their shields like tiny flames. Leonidas sat apart, gazing northward toward the unseen sea. A messenger arrived. Another allied city had pledged men to their cause. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. It was enough to form the illusion of resistance, enough to write their names into memory. Leonidas simply nodded. "Then we hold," he said. "We hold the gates." The hot gates, Thermopylae, a narrow pass between mountain and sea, where the land itself funnels armies into a single throat. The cliffs rise steep and black, the salt air thick with the hiss of unseen waves. To one side, boiling springs release a faint steam, the breath of the earth. The ancients believed the gods had left it so, as a reminder that even stone lives. It was here that Leonidas would make his stand. Not because the terrain was beautiful, but because it was inevitable. A place where numbers meant little, where the courage of a few could defy the vastness of an empire. The Persians would have to pass through the gates, and the gates would not open easily. The Greeks arrived in silence. They built no fortress, no wall. The land itself was their shield. Each man took his place as though stepping into a long-rehearsed dance. Spears aligned, shields overlapping, their edges kissing with precision. The phalanx was less an army than an organism, a single breathing creature made of discipline and trust. When dawn came, the mist rose from the springs like incense curling around their legs. Somewhere beyond the haze, the sound of drums began, deep, measured, inhumanly vast. It was the sound of Persia arriving. One of the younger soldiers asked how many they faced. Leonidas did not answer. He simply said, "Enough to test the silence." From where I stand now, centuries later, the air of Thermopylae feels unchanged. The mountains still press close. The wind still moves as it must have then. When you walk along the narrow road, you can almost hear it. The faint echo of shields locking, of footsteps measured by purpose. The stones remember. They always do. And sometimes, if you listen closely enough, the steam rising from the spring seems to whisper. Not words, but something older. A rhythm that neither empire nor time could erase. The omens had been read, the gods had spoken, and as the sun climbed higher, the world began to turn toward its appointed silence. In the coming days, this pass would become legend. Men would fall, and time would carry their names into eternity. But on that first morning, before the clash, before the dust and the arrows, there was only calm. The kind of calm that comes before storms, before history itself exhales. Leonidas stood at the edge of the cliffs and closed his eyes. "The sea," he murmured, almost to himself, "is never conquered. We can only delay the tide." He opened his eyes again. The mist was clearing. The first glimmer of distant bronze caught the light, a shimmer across the plain, like sunlight breaking on water. The Persians had come, and the silence of Sparta had come with them. Chapter 4. The Hearts of Sparta. dawn spills over the narrow pass of Thermopylae like liquid gold, brushing the jagged cliffs and rocky outcrops with a tremulous light that seems alive, as though the mountains themselves are holding their breath. The air is sharp, carrying the scent of salt from the distant sea mingled with the earthy perfume of pine and stone. Here, in this corridor between the mountains and the waters, time itself appears to bend, slowed by the weight of what is to come. The narrowness of the pass concentrates not just soldiers, but intent, courage, and history, the invisible pulse of generations flowing through each man who stands ready. The Spartans, sons of the Agog, move in quiet ritual. Spears are polished until their tips gleam like frozen fire. Shields are waxed and inspected, each dent and scratch memorized as if it were a map of prior battles. Armor is strapped with meticulous precision, the leather straps whispering against bronze as each soldier becomes part of the larger whole. The motions are deliberate, but beneath this disciplined choreography lies something no training can convey. The understanding that each step may be a final one, that life itself is bound to the lives of the brothers standing shoulder to shoulder. There is a hum in the air, subtle but undeniable, the almost imperceptible vibration of anticipation that ripples through the rocks, carried by the wind and absorbed by the earth. Sparta is not merely a city, it is a crucible. Its boys are moulded early, instructed in the language of silence and the rhythms of endurance. Every glance exchanged in the training yards is understood. Every gesture, every sigh carries meaning. The young men who grow here are taught to listen, not just to commands but to the sounds of the earth, the whisper of the wind through the mountains, the quiet signals that pass between comrades in the field. From the first moment they lift a wooden sword or carry a shield, they are learning a language older than memory, the language of survival, of courage, of devotion. Within the courtyards, the elders speak softly, not with the clamour of orders, but with the weight of legend. They tell of ancestors who held the line when the world trembled, of victories and defeats woven into the fabric of the land, of duty as a bridge between mortal life and immortal memory. Each story is a lesson in resilience, a reminder that honour is earned not in the heat of battle alone, but in the quiet, unseen moments of preparation, of sacrifice, of attention to every breath and heartbeat. The young warriors listen without interruption, absorbing these words into their bones, letting the resonance of history settle into their marrow. As the first light touches the cliffs, the line of Spartan shields catches it and shines like a river of bronze flowing through the pass. The rocks themselves seem to acknowledge the courage gathered here, the wind shifting gently as if to whisper encouragement, the mountains leaning close as silent witnesses. Each soldier stands with a rhythm in his chest that echoes the rhythm of the land itself. The narrowness of the pass magnifies their presence. They are not just individuals, they are a living, breathing wall, a testament to human determination and the power of unity. Among them, the leaders move quietly, not with the arrogance of authority, but with the calm assurance of experience. They check positions, whisper guidance, adjust a strap here, nod approval there. Every movement is precise, deliberate, a reflection of a culture that values discipline above all else, that measures courage not by impulse but by restraint. Here, in the shadow of history, there is no room for fear and none for hesitation. The warriors understand instinctively. To falter is to imperil not just themselves, but the very line of defence, the fragile balance that holds this pass against the tide of an advancing empire. And yet, even amidst this preparation, there is a quiet poetry. The Spartans move like elements of the landscape itself, as if stone and metal and human resolve are one. Spears rise and fall with the same rhythm as the crashing waves of the distant sea. The shields absorb light and sound alike, creating a mosaic of movement that mirrors the windswept cliffs. Every breath, every glance, every whispered word is a note in a silent symphony that stretches from the past to the present and reaches forward into the unknown. As the hours pass, the anticipation thickens, yet the Spartans remain still, a testament to patience and focus. Their minds wander briefly, not to fear, but to reflection. Some remember the hills and streams of their childhoods, the fields where they first learned to run and to fight. Some think of home, of family, of promises made and yet to be kept. And some simply listen, to the wind slicing across the pass, to the quiet pulse of their own hearts, to the whisper of eternity brushing against mortal lives. Here, even thought seems to slow, stretched by the enormity of what is coming. Stories circulate quietly among the warriors, tales that have travelled from father to son. Legends of the pass itself, of battles fought and lives given, of courage that turned the tide of history. The rock faces are said to remember every footstep, every clash of spear and shield, and the wind carries the echoes of those who fell long ago. The Spartans, steeped in this memory, feel themselves as part of a continuum, as if the very land has chosen them to uphold its silent, unwavering testimony. By midday, the sun climbs higher, and the shadows of the mountains deepen, stretching across the pass like dark fingers. The enemy approaches, a tide of men whose numbers seem endless. But the Spartans do not flinch. They stand in formation, not with arrogance, but with quiet certainty. Each man knows his place, his role, and the rhythm of the line is almost sacred. The pass amplifies their presence. Their unity becomes a force larger than the sum of its parts. Here, courage is a shared breath, a collective heartbeat, an unspoken covenant with the earth itself. In the moments before the first clash, the air grows thick with tension. The wind carries not just the salt of the sea or the scent of stone, but the weight of history itself. The mountains, the pass, the very sky seem to lean closer, listening. The Spartans feel it in their bones, the subtle shift of inevitability, the knowledge that this is a moment that will echo far beyond their lifetimes. And still, they stand. Every man breathes slowly, measured, deliberate, as though aligning himself with the rhythm of the earth, drawing strength from the silence around him. They have trained their whole lives for this, but in truth, no training can fully capture what it is to stand here at the threshold of fate. The Spartans do not speak. Words are unnecessary. Their eyes meet, and in that silent exchange lies a world of understanding, the recognition of mortality, the embrace of duty, the bond of brothers whose lives are intertwined not by chance, but by choice. And so the pass of Thermopylae waits, a crucible, a witness, a testament. The mountains watch in quiet grandeur. The wind whispers ancient truths through the narrow corridor, and the Spartans, hearts steady and eyes unflinching, prepare to write their names into memory itself. Even now, in the shadow of what is to come, there is a strange beauty, the harmony of human will and the stillness of nature, the quiet dignity of preparation, the knowledge that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to stand in spite of it. Here, in this narrow corridor between mountain and sea, history breathes. And for the men of Sparta, the moment of reckoning approaches, not as a threat, but as the culmination of everything that has shaped them, their discipline, their devotion, their unwavering resolve. And as the enemy draws near, and the first echoes of battle ripple through the pass, the Spartans do not move in panic. They do not falter. They stand, shoulders squared, spears ready, shields locked, and in that stillness one can almost hear the land itself whispering, "Hold fast, hold true, honour binds you, and through this your courage will be remembered forever." In this narrow corridor, where the mountains guard their silence and the wind carries both memory and promise, the hearts of Sparta beat as one. And as the first clash of steel echoes across the pass, it is not just a battle that begins, but a story that will ripple through eternity, carried in the wind, the stones, and the quiet, unyielding courage of those who dared to stand. Chapter 5: Fire and Shadows at Thermopylae. The air trembles with the first echoes of combat. Spears strike shields with a metallic thunder, the sound ricocheting against the narrow walls of the pass as if the mountains themselves are amplifying the struggle. Dust rises from the earth, mingling with sweat and the tang of blood, turning the sunlight into a hazy, almost otherworldly glow. Here, in this corridor carved between stone and sea, history is no longer an abstract tale. It is alive, vibrating in the rhythm of each heartbeat, each cry, each calculated thrust. The Spartans move as one. Their shields overlap like the scales of an enormous living creature, their spears a forest of bronze that dances with lethal precision. Each motion is instinct, honed through years of rigorous training, yet beneath the surface of discipline is something more, something that cannot be taught, the recognition of vulnerability and the deliberate choice to embrace it. Every Spartan understands that to stand here is to court death, and yet there is no hesitation. Fear is present, yes, but it is transformed, transmuted into focus, into unity, into the sheer poetry of resistance. Across the pass, the Persian host surges forward, a sea of colours and banners that stretches into the distance, their numbers overwhelming, almost infinite. Yet the narrowness of the terrain flattens their advantage. One by one they collide with the Spartan wall, their momentum broken against bronze and resolve. The clash of metal, the grunt of exertion, the cries of the wounded, all are woven into a tapestry of struggle, a chaotic harmony that seems to stretch time itself. In the midst of it, the Spartan commanders move like shadows, adjusting the line, reading the flow of battle with an almost supernatural awareness, guiding their men with gestures barely visible, with words barely whispered. And yet, for all their training and discipline, the Spartans are not mere machines of war. Each man carries a story, a memory, a fragment of home in the back of his mind, like a hidden flame that warms him even in the cold inevitability of death. Perhaps it is the memory of a father's instruction, or the laughter of a brother, or the quiet moments in the training yards when the sun fell across their shoulders and the world seemed infinite. These recollections do not weaken them. Instead, they anchor them, a tether to life even as they brush against mortality. The battle stretches, hour upon hour, each second a test of endurance, courage, and will. Spears splinter, shields dent, bodies falter, but the line holds. The Spartans' unity is not just physical, it is spiritual, a bond forged through ritual, sweat, and shared understanding. In the chaos of war, each man knows instinctively where the others are, how they move, when they will strike. It is a symphony of motion, a living embodiment of everything Sparta has ever demanded of its sons: loyalty, courage, and an unwavering sense of duty. And yet, the shadows lengthen. As the sun arcs toward its zenith, the Persian forces adapt, probing the flanks, testing for weaknesses, searching for a breach in the line that has refused to yield. The air grows heavier, thick with dust and the weight of expectation. Here, history's hand feels tangible, pressing against every breath, every movement. One can almost hear the whispers of the past carried on the wind, reminders of battles fought, of lives lost, of courage immortalized. The Spartans respond not with panic, but with calm, measured ferocity. Spears meet shields with precision, the rhythm of defense punctuated by sudden thrusts that fell enemies before they can advance. The line seems to shimmer, to ripple with a life of its own, each movement choreographed yet entirely organic, a reflection of the human spirit at its most concentrated. And above it all, the leaders maintain a serene focus, eyes scanning the field, calculating, anticipating, ensuring that every motion is in harmony with the whole. It is in these moments, between the clash of metal, between the cries and the dust, that the true essence of Sparta reveals itself. Courage is not the loud roar of defiance, it is the silent, steady heartbeat, the unshakable certainty that one will hold the line because the man beside you will hold it too. Honor is not claimed in victory alone, but in the decision to stand when standing is hardest. Here, in the fire of combat, these abstract concepts become tangible, living forces, shaping every movement, every choice, every breath. The hours pass. Sunlight turns to the deep gold of late afternoon, shadows stretching like fingers across the pass. The Persian numbers continue to press, yet the Spartans, though exhausted, remain unbroken. Their resolve seems almost supernatural, as if the earth itself grants them strength, whispering encouragement through the rocks and the wind. Each fallen comrade is honoured instantly, their sacrifice folded into the rhythm of the line, their memory carried forward by the living, who do not pause, do not waver, do not surrender. Amid the chaos, there are moments of eerie clarity. A soldier's gaze meets that of an enemy, and in that fleeting connection, the futility and magnificence of war is understood. Life and death, courage and fear, duty and desire, all exist in a single heartbeat. The narrowness of Thermopylae concentrates not just the clash of armies, but the essence of human experience itself, distilled into motion, sweat, and unyielding will. As twilight approaches, the line of Spartans remains, though the struggle has etched itself into every muscle and bone. Their bodies are battered, yet their spirit is unbroken. They have become more than men. They are a living testament, a force of nature as inevitable as the sea pressing against the cliffs, as eternal as the mountains that cradle the pass. And though the outcome of the battle remains uncertain, the echo of their courage is already reaching beyond the horizon, threading through time to be remembered by all who would hear of it. The night falls, and in the quiet that follows, the past seems to sigh. Dust settles, the cries fade into memory, and the wind carries the whispers of valour across the rocky corridor. Even in the darkness, the presence of the Spartans lingers, a subtle reminder that courage can endure beyond the confines of mortality. And for those watching, whether in that distant moment or centuries later, the question remains: what does it mean to stand when all seems lost, to defy inevitability with nothing but will and unity? Here, at Thermopylae, the answer is written in bronze and blood, in stone and shadow, in the unyielding hearts of men who chose to rise and hold their ground. The battle is more than history. It is a lesson, a whisper of the extraordinary potential within those who embrace discipline, courage, and unwavering loyalty. And as the night embraces the pass, one can almost feel the land itself acknowledging the truth. Some acts of courage, some stands of defiance, ripple far beyond the moment, echoing across time and memory, inspiring generations yet to come. Chapter 6. Echoes in the shadow of the pass. Night drapes Thermopylae in a cool, muted veil, yet the pass does not fall silent immediately. The dust settles slowly, carrying the faint scent of sweat, metal, and scorched earth. Silence arrives gradually, like a tide retreating from the shore, leaving behind traces of what has passed. In that quiet, the echoes of the day linger, shattered shields, broken spears, whispered commands, and the ghostly rhythm of countless footsteps that once carved determination into the narrow corridor. The presence of the Spartans lingers, not as men, but as an almost tangible aura that the wind carries along the cliffs. It weaves between jagged stones and low shrubs, whispering of courage and sacrifice, murmuring of unity in the face of overwhelming odds. To walk the pass now is to feel the air remember each clash of bronze, each nod between brothers in arms, each heartbeat that dared defiance. Above, the moon casts silver light across ridges and boulders, elongating shadows into frozen stances of soldiers long gone. The pass becomes a canvas for memory, every stone holding fragments of lives entwined in struggle. The wind, gentle now, seems to speak in hushed tones, carrying fragments of mantras, echoes of commands, and the cadence of soldiers' chants. In the quiet, the battle begins to blur with legend. Some say the spirits of fallen warriors linger still, vigilant, their presence felt in fleeting glimpses of movement at the edge of vision, a shimmer of bronze in moonlight before vanishing. Others report an inexplicable calm, the air itself pausing, honouring the devotion and sacrifice that occurred here. It is in these whispers of the unseen that Thermopylae's mystique endures, threading history into myth. Even the Persian host transforms in memory. They are no longer merely an invading force, but part of the narrative that folds upon itself, a mirror to Spartan courage. Their numbers, movements, strategy, they persist as shadows and echoes, reminders of the balance between the overwhelming and the steadfast, chaos and focus. The battle is no longer measured solely in blood, but in will, intention, and the choices made when the world demanded more than most could give. Time feels elastic here. Hours stretch into lifetimes, and the clash of bronze reverberates in imagination long after the sun has set. Each fallen soldier becomes a story etched into the fabric of the pass. Each act of bravery, a thread connecting generations. Thermopylae is not merely a place, but a living memory, a threshold where mortal and eternal converge, where courage imprints upon the air itself, and where shadows of the past guide those who walk hereafter. Amid this stillness lies the reminder that the greatest battles are often fought with spirit as much as with steel. Every stance, every shield raised, every step forward, though mortal, becomes a meditation on human potential, a dialogue between body, mind, and honour. The Spartans' devotion was never spectacle, but testament to discipline, loyalty, and a profound understanding of duty that surpasses fear. As night deepens, the mountains seem to lean closer, listening. Thermopylae becomes a cathedral of memory, the wind moving through the pass like incense through ancient halls, carrying unspoken stories of valour. It whispers of sacrifice, vigilance, and the subtle threads binding the living to the dead, humanity to eternity. Somewhere in the darkness, a lone owl sweeps silently across the cliffs, its cry cutting through the still air, a reminder that life continues alongside memory. Night animals stir, tracing paths through rocks and brush, quietly acknowledging a world scarred yet enduring. The waters of the nearby sea reflect the moon, tracing contours of a past forever marked by resolve. In imagination, the Spartans rise again in fleeting glimpses, their spears and shields glimmering with intent and devotion. They do not move as men, but as extensions of the land itself, a whisper bridging mortal courage and timeless legend. At Thermopylae, past and present entwine, forming a pulse that lingers in the chest of anyone who dares to listen. The true legacy resides in listening, not in strategy or casualties, but in the enduring whisper of courage that defies numbers, bends time, and transforms a narrow corridor of stone into a sanctuary of human will. For those who linger and allow the wind to carry them, the past speaks in the language of shadow and breath, a lesson in unity, a meditation in defiance, a song of human potential echoing into eternity. The wind moves through the pass, brushing stones, shrubs, fallen and living alike, carrying stories from ridge to ridge, century to century. Each whisper is a heartbeat, a pulse of memory, a bridge between what was and what endures. And as the first stars of dawn begin to glimmer faintly over the cliffs, a soft understanding settles over the pass. Thermopylae is eternal, not merely for its battle, but for the courage it imprinted upon the earth, an enduring whisper calling through time, waiting to be heard by those who walk its narrow path. Chapter 7. The Legacy of Shadows and Steel. The first light of dawn touches Thermopylae with hesitant gold, spilling over the cliffs and brushing the narrow pass with warmth that seems almost sacred. The wind carries the memory of the night, gentle now, a lull between whispers and echoes, as if the land itself breathes in remembrance. Stones, scarred by footsteps and spears, glimmer faintly, and the faint outline of the pass appears almost timeless, a corridor frozen between history and legend. Here, in this slender stretch of land, courage and sacrifice coexist like twin shadows. The Spartans, long gone, are not absent. They are present in every subtle motion of the wind, in every ripple of the nearby sea, in the way sunlight glances off bronze as if recalling the gleam of shields. The narrow corridor becomes a conduit, where mortal resolve touches something eternal, and every heartbeat that once surged here continues to vibrate invisibly across time. It is in the silence that Thermopylae speaks most clearly. The whispers of soldiers blend with the rustle of the olive trees and the lap of water along the shore. Bronze meets stone once more, not in battle, but in memory. Every stance, every raised shield, every strategic step forward becomes a lesson whispered to anyone willing to pause, to listen, to feel the weight of history as it presses lightly against the chest. The battle was brief, yet its resonance stretches across millennia. It is not measured in the tides of blood alone, but in the courage that dared to meet an overwhelming tide with nothing but unity, discipline, and the unshakable belief in purpose. The Spartans understood what the world often forgets, that true strength is forged not merely in muscle or metal, but in the alignment of heart and mind, in the acceptance of mortality while embracing duty. As you walk the pass today, you may glimpse the phantom movements of men long vanished, the glint of a spear, the weight of a shield, a fleeting sense of anticipation frozen in the air. Shadows of the Persian host too linger, not as enemies, but as part of the intricate weave that defines courage against odds. Thermopylae becomes a living dialogue between presence and absence, between flesh and legend, between fear and its transcendence. The surrounding mountains rise like silent witnesses, guarding the narrow corridor as they have for centuries, their jagged faces etched by wind and time reflect not just light but memory, capturing echoes of commands, cries, and the subtle cadence of shared intent. The pass is transformed, no longer merely a strategic location, but a cathedral of human potential, a sacred space where resolve and honor converse with eternity. Legends grow from these shadows. Travelers whisper of hearing the clink of armor when no one is near, the rustle of cloaks across rocks, or the sudden sense of being observed by unseen eyes. Some claim to feel a presence on the ridge, silent, vigilant, protective, urging respect for the lives and choices that once carved the corridor into history. These are not tales of fear, but reminders that Thermopylae is alive in memory, and memory itself is sacred. In quiet moments, the pass offers lessons far beyond strategy or war. It teaches patience, reverence, and understanding. Each stone, each fragment of cliff, each gust of wind carries the resonance of the past forward, merging it with the present. It is a meditation in movement and stillness, in presence and absence, in fleeting life and enduring spirit. The sea below murmurs softly, as if echoing the cadence of shields and footsteps from long ago. Birds wheel above, tracing arcs that mirror the trajectories of ancient combatants, and the trees sway gently, carrying whispers that cross centuries. Thermopylae is no longer only a battlefield. It is a sanctuary of reflection, where courage and sacrifice become touchstones for anyone willing to walk the narrow corridor with humility. And in that walking, a subtle truth emerges, that heroism is not simply the act of standing against an army, but the quiet, unyielding choice to honour principles greater than oneself. The Spartans' defiance, though mortal, transcended mortality. It carved a space in history where spirit can linger, and where the narrow path of Thermopylae transforms into a metaphor for the enduring human will. The wind, ever patient, weaves through the past, threading bronze and stone, shadow and light, memory and imagination. Each gust carries fragments of stories, long breaths of resolve, whispers of strategy and loyalty, and the faint echo of a song, unsung yet ever present. To listen is to enter communion with history itself, to feel the pulse of courage not as an abstract concept but as a living presence in the air. As the sun climbs higher, the pass illuminates not just the land but the profound resonance of human action. Thermopylae teaches that moments of bravery, though brief in time, ripple outward endlessly, touching generations and shaping imagination. Each visitor, each observer, becomes part of that continuum, inhaling courage, exhaling remembrance, and carrying the legacy forward. It is here, in the quiet intimacy of the narrow corridor, that the boundaries between life and legend blur. Every stone and shadow becomes a story, every gust of wind, a messenger, every ripple in the water, a heartbeat echoing across time. Thermopylae is not merely a battlefield, it is a living meditation on courage, honour, and the delicate balance between mortality and legacy. And so, as the day deepens and the light moves across cliffs and pass alike, we leave Thermopylae not in conquest, but in contemplation. The echoes of shields and footsteps, of whispers and heartbeats continue to resonate. The Spartan spirit lingers, patient and eternal, guiding those who walk the path, teaching that true valour is not always witnessed, yet it endures. Tonight, as the stars begin to pierce the sky above, imagine standing within that narrow pass. Feel the wind brushing past your face, carrying the faint resonance of bravery through centuries. Close your eyes, breathe slowly, and let the whispers of Thermopylae fill your mind. Know that courage, once lived, never dies. It becomes part of the world, as enduring as stone, as constant as the wind, and as eternal as the memory of those who stood firm when the world demanded everything. And now, dear listener, as your heart carries these echoes into the quiet of night, rest with the knowledge that bravery, honour and sacrifice are never lost. They are woven into the very air, whispered through the mountains, and held softly in the rhythm of the wind. Good night.